Welcome to Semiconductor News Decoded. I'm Ty, with 31 years inside the semiconductor industry, bringing you the real view from the factory floor. Today's topic? China's Supreme People's Court has upheld a preliminary injunction against Infineon's GaN products. I'll break down what this actually means for the industry, and what it doesn't mean. As always, I'll explain everything in the most simplified way possible. Even a middle schooler should be able to follow along. If you're a specialist watching, some parts may feel oversimplified, but I'd like to prioritize giving everyone the big picture first. Think of it as a rivalry between two rival bakeries fighting over secret recipes in courts all over the world. So sit back and enjoy. Here's how I'd picture this whole situation. Imagine two bakeries on the same street. One is called Inno's Bakery. It's the hot new spot that's been selling a ton of bread lately. The other is Feeney's Bakery, an old-school shop that holds more traditional bread recipes than just about anyone else. These two bakeries are now pointing fingers at each other, each claiming the other secretly copied one of their signature recipes, and they're taking each other to court in multiple cities at the same time. What makes this dispute especially messy is that every city has its own courthouse, and each courthouse makes its own call. In one city, Inno's Bakery wins. In another city, Feeney's Bakery comes out ahead. In a third city, it's basically a draw. So depending on where the case is heard, you get a completely different result. The same dispute, totally different verdicts. This time around, the highest court in one major city, think of it like the Supreme Court, ruled that Feeney's Bakery cannot sell a certain bread in that city. But here's the important detail. This isn't a final verdict. It's a temporary restraining order, essentially a stop selling for now while we figure things out type of ruling. Still, for Inno's Bakery, getting that kind of ruling from the top court is a significant win in that particular market. When a legal fight like this drags on, both bakeries end up burning through money on lawyers and court fees. Time and resources that could have gone into developing new breads are getting eaten up by litigation instead. At some point, you start to wonder, wouldn't it be smarter to just say, hey, you can use my recipe and I'll use yours, and we both pay each other a small fee? That's a licensing deal, and it becomes more and more tempting the longer the fight goes on. Of course, reaching that kind of handshake agreement isn't easy, but as rulings start coming in from different cities, some favoring one side, some the other, both bakeries start doing the math. Is it really worth fighting indefinitely when a deal might be more profitable for both? That's the underlying calculus here. Now, let me shift from the bakery analogy and get into what's actually happening in the semiconductor world. Let me summarize the bakery dispute stance. InnoScience is the new kid on the block bakery, and Infineon is the established old-school shop with the deep recipe portfolio. The real-world versions are InnoScience, a Chinese GaN semiconductor maker, and Infineon, a German power device giant. GaN stands for Gallium Nitride, a next-generation power semiconductor material that's been gaining serious momentum as a replacement for conventional silicon. And honestly, my current position on this GaN patent battle is almost exactly the same as this bakery story. InnoScience announced that China's Supreme People's Court has upheld a preliminary injunction, what Chinese law calls a behavioral preservation order, against Infineon. This means Infineon's GaN products are now subject to restrictions on sale, distribution, and importation within mainland China. To understand the full picture, you need to know there are actually two separate legal tracks running in parallel. The first is the main lawsuit. On May 27, 2026, the Suzhou Intermediate People's Court found Infineon liable for patent infringement and ordered it to pay 10 million yuan in damages. Infineon still has the right to appeal that ruling. The second track, and this is what InnoScience's announcement is actually about, is the preliminary injunction. The Suzhou court issued it first, and the Supreme People's Court upheld it on review. So when InnoScience says major victory, they're referring specifically to this preliminary injunction being maintained, not a final determination on patent infringement. That distinction matters. There's another layer of caution here. The announcement that China's Supreme People's Court has upheld this comes from InnoScience's side. Infineon has not yet issued a detailed public response. It's entirely possible that Infineon will challenge this ruling or raise further procedural objections. The on-the-ground enforcement of this injunction is something we'll need to keep watching closely. GaN as a market is expanding fast across a wide range of applications. EV charging systems, fast chargers for smartphones, industrial power supplies, data center power conversion, and more. As the market grows, patent portfolios and IP risk management become directly tied to competitive positioning. This is not a side issue anymore, it's core strategy. Let's zoom out a bit. This InnoScience versus Infineon battle isn't limited to China. It's playing out on multiple fronts internationally. At the U.S. International Trade Commission, the ITC, the result was essentially a split decision, with neither side landing a clean win. In Germany, Infineon appears to be in the stronger position. It's a genuinely multi-jurisdictional fight. The fact that results are diverging by country is actually a very common pattern in global patent litigation. Patents are inherently territorial. A patent registered in Japan doesn't automatically apply in the United States. Each country examines cases under its own legal framework and reaches its own conclusions. That's why you can have opposite outcomes in different jurisdictions from what is essentially the same underlying dispute. Based on my years of experience in this industry, when you start seeing mixed outcomes like this, wins here, losses there, it tends to create conditions where both sides eventually start thinking, maybe a long-term licensing deal makes more sense than continuing to fight in every court around the world. That shift in thinking tends to happen gradually, and I think we're moving in that direction here. A cross-license agreement is when two companies agree to let each other use their respective patents, typically in exchange for royalty payments. When you factor in the cost of litigation, the management bandwidth it consumes, and the risk it creates for future product development, it's not at all unusual for semiconductor competitors to end up at the cross-licensing table. It happens more often than people outside the industry might expect. That said, this particular situation isn't straightforward. InnoScience is holding a powerful card, a Chinese market injunction. Infineon, on the other hand, holds one of the largest patent portfolios in the power device space and is stronger in European jurisdictions. The balance of power at a potential negotiating table will depend heavily on which side is feeling more pain at any given moment. The GaN market is projected to continue growing sharply over the next several years. For both companies, continuing to burn resources on litigation while a major market expansion is underway is not an ideal use of capital. Going forward, it will be worth watching closely for any signals of settlement talks, licensing negotiations, or shifts in legal strategy from either side. Let me pull together everything we've covered. There are two separate legal tracks in this case. On the main lawsuit track, the Suzhou Intermediate People's Court issued a first-instance ruling on May 27, 2026, finding Infineon liable for patent infringement and ordering 10 million yuan in damages, and Infineon retains the right to appeal. On the preliminary injunction track, China's Supreme People's Court upheld the injunction on review, placing restrictions on Infineon's GaN product sales in the Chinese market, and this is the core of InnoScience's announcement. Meanwhile, in the US, the ITC delivered a split outcome. In Germany, Infineon holds the stronger position. As the GaN market continues to grow, IP strategy and regional patent risk management are becoming major competitive differentiators for all players in the space. Here's my takeaway. This Chinese ruling gives InnoScience significant leverage, diplomatically and in any future negotiation. But it does not mean InnoScience has won outright, and it certainly doesn't signal the end of Infineon as a GaN player. Multiple legal fronts are still active, and as more verdicts come in across jurisdictions, I think the realistic endgame starts to look more like a cross-licensing agreement than a total knockout. I'll be honest, I have a feeling that's where this is heading, but it's still a bit early to call it with confidence. What I can say is that the GaN IP battle is going to remain one of the most important ongoing stories in the semiconductor world for the foreseeable future. That's all for today. I'll keep bringing you semiconductor news and analysis, so if you found this useful, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. This has been Ty on Semiconductor News Decoded.